I have no idea. But it seems to be coming from behind the bookcase.
No! No!
Behind the bookcase.
No! No!
What an opening! My name's Quinlan, and this is Melbourne Musos Live. That's why everyone's screaming. And the subject of tonight's show is adapt or die. That's right. Hey. Hello, my name's Quinlan from Melbourne Musos Live, as I just told you, and I hope I scared the bejesus out of you. Hey! How often have we heard that? Adapt or die, that kind of thing. There's a couple of bullet points I've got here. When you're writing stuff, you know, if you're a journalist or if you are, you know, you're a writer, publish or perish. Go with what you've got. That's another bullet point that I love, actually. Dear Alan Zavod. Mwah, there you go. And a couple of different things that I'll get into. Now, why am I talking about this? One of the things that I have to do every week is, to a certain degree, reinvent myself. I've got to come up with something new. I have to go with what I got, because what it is that what I have under my hands are whatever I was able to practice up as a kid, you see. So here I am playing a bit of a bit of jazz. Things like that. And that was at its peak, arguably, during the big band era, okay, of the 1930s, right into the war days of World War II and stuff. Then basically got taken over by rock and roll. Rock and roll. What was it? It's a jazz feel with rock and roll over the top, do you see? And then rock and roll morphed into all these things, you see. And then what would happen is that little jazz rhythm started to get flattened out. And you started to get... But people like Earl Palmer. Adapt or die, things morph, things move on. One of the little articles I saw in the paper, was shared on the old Facebook, is a much-loved rehearsal studio up in Brisbane closing down, and all their bits and pieces getting auctioned off. Very sad. Something's happening here very locally as well, with a colleague who I'd like to call a friend of mine is doing the same, and I'm watching everything like that, and so are we all. One of the reasons I'm bringing this up is because I got the wonderful opportunity with a colleague of mine, Kimberly, who we were asked to go and give a little talk at a college, secondary college, which is very close to where I am here. And what it was, that the kids were terrific. Took a while to warm up, but the teacher or the coordinator got the kids to write out a list of questions, and they were poignant, you know, sort of thing. Poignant. Don't you love that? It's like moist. Anyway, so what it is I'm bouncing off that. I'm adapting or I'm dying, that kind of thing. And one of the reasons why I have shows like this is to actually address these issues. Of course it's a drum tip show, so when I'm doing that with jazz, it's a cut time kind of feel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, da, 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 da. But when you're doing that, that can morph into other things. Green beat, two field, dead ant, the dead ant song. Lovingly known as the Pink Panther, but all the primary school kids seem to call it, it's the dead ant song. There you go. Anyway, so what it is adapt or die, and what I'm getting at is how do you take your chops that you've built up, how do you take your network of gigs, all this sort of business, and morph them into the next stage of which we're heading. One of the things that is a little bit upcoming with my writing and essays that I write to everyone's chagrin, that kind of thing. But I've been teaching since 1978. I took up the drums in 1972, a little tiny 4-piece, lovely. And what goes on is that, after a half a dozen years or so with good old Harold Ripper and all that, I got asked to start a couple of lessons, and I went, Harold, how do I... Follow me, son. So I was his apprentice, asking for advice, what to start with, all this business. I had a pretty good idea. I just did what Harold did. I've still got the books up there in the bookcase. But what it is that was the late 70s, and none of us had a computer at home. The only computers we'd see is like in the, in the big buildings and stuff. And the general thing in the day is that you'd scribble everything out in the Spirax music book. You'd tell the kids to go off and buy a book, and that was the lesson. You'd take the book and page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. And that's the way it was. And then you'd say, I've got to learn this song. Yeah, do that on your own time. I've already taught you those beats. You've got that book there. So we end up building a small library, then you see, and that's what goes on. And wonderful stuff. Then what started to happen is, especially with guitar, you started to get tabs. So all of a sudden, the music book with all, my Led Zeppelin complete and all that, all the beautiful black dots. And there was just a couple of things, like the solo to Since I've Been Loving You off Led Zeppelin's third album, had the opening scribbles of what would become tabs as we know it now for guitar. And that's a great aid, but it just takes away what used to be an aid to learn how to read music. Now, for so many, I just tab it out, all that sort of stuff. And what that does, and what that did, and I started to see it when I started to break into things like theatre shows and things like that, and productions for the local school. You just got given a book and you just had to read it. And it got to a point I was there as the drummer for the various schools I taught at that would put on productions like Annie, Little Shop of Horrors, I only talked about just the other day, all this sort of business, and all these musical Kismet, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, all the classic musicals. And it was kind of like it's like an angle, the next angle of your gig. Most people know, we've got a band and we do our cover band gigs, we've got a tribute band, we've got this, here's my originals, thank you for the 15 people that turned up, that kind of stuff. But there's a whole other side, such as theatre work and stuff like that, being in the pit orchestra. And I've been in small ones and pretty large ones with a full horn section when the budget was available. Fantastic. I remember the Whiz at Tattersall's Theatre, which was in Werribee back in the day, a long time ago now. But basically, you just got given a book and you had to flick, 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 read it. You learned to play one-handed. You might be going, And then the iPad came in, there's a little button you can press, a little foot button, and it just turns the page for you. And I saw that transition, you know, the people with the music, and then all of a sudden, music, iPad, music, iPad, music, iPad. And I'm going, oh, have a look at that. I'm still old school. I'm still turning the pages and all the little tricks of the trade, you see. That's another angle. You got to have an angle. I think that was Danny Kaye. And what it is adapt or die. You see, what happened was that when the home computer came in, all of a sudden there was these programs, and all of a sudden the internet. What's this thing called the internet? You know, in the mid-90s and stuff like that. So all of a sudden you got drum tabs and everything like that. And what started to happen is that you had to go with the flow to keep your teaching going and your playing going, you see. If I was a curmudgeon and still just went, half the gig would go away. It's wonderful. It's like chopping a whole part of your income off. And then what had started to happen is that when you learn your stuff, a lot of the things that you have to do is just know your beats, okay? And one of the things that seems to have bobbed up fairly recently in the last few days is something that's been around a long time, but breakbeats. They just seem to be, oh, are we doing breakbeats this last fortnight? So you get this kind of paradiddly business. So you might have rock beat, paradiddly, and the paradiddles were just there as marching rhythms, you know. They've been around, you know, for a millennia, that kind of business, but all of a sudden they're used for some of the most recent of music, okay? Even Earl Palmer in the 50s started to bring in his paradiddly bits into 50s rock and roll, which I started to talk about when it morphed from jazz into rock and roll, and then all the different areas of rock and roll, whether it be metal, country rock, Celtic rock, all this sort of biz, you see, adapt or die, you see. At some point, that's one bullet point I wanted to talk about. It is a little bit talky, tonight's show, but I want to put in as much drums as I can. But the next thing is you've got to go with what you've got, you see.
No!
Hello. Anything for a cheap laugh. Anyway, there you go. Go with what you got. What have you got? What are you going to give him? Give me. What are you going to give the audience? All that sort of stuff. If you come up with certain things, you can morph them into other areas, okay? So when you're actually... One of the reasons that I have things like multi-sticks and mallets and all that sort of business is that with the aforementioned theatre shows, you're not always just going to play a beat. You are going to be sound effects you might have. Now, what am I doing there? It's a single stroke roll, you see. Now, if I'm doing or anything like that, there's the door, you know. Match grip, did you notice? I'm usually a trad grip player. Few effects. That's very thundery there. I'm creating effects, you see, but you notice what I had to do to get them. Double stroke roll. Learn how to move around the drum. Take the snares off. All right, effects, you see. So what happened? Double stroke roll, you see? Mama dada, mama dada. Ah! You would learn that in marching, right? Ooh! See? Adapt, you see. Go with what you've got. Build up your chops, you see. Not for chop's sake. Sometimes you're going to get something that requires something very subtle, but yet is moider for your hands, okay? I often talk about my time with the dear and beloved City of Essendon Brass Band in the sense that you had one drum. I have a little bit of a laugh when people hang shit on Doris. I'm going, well, yeah, but sure, I'm not set in stone. It's here for the show. I've got 5-piece Delilah over in the front room, ready to go for Murph and the Magic Tones and all that. And when I'm depping in for Dear Murph, hope you're okay, mate. Mwah! And all that. But for 7 years, you just got a snare drum in front of you. And you're doing the marches. That's Chop City. Keep your eyes on a bargain. You know. That kind of thing. And I talk about that quite a bit. So these chops. Here's something for you that's just very recent, down to last night, actually. I gave a birthday present of a couple of tickets to concert hall with the playing of the wonderful Mike Oldfield Tubular Bells in concert and stuff, which goes back to the 70s. Wonderful piece of music. And by all accounts, it was wonderful. I was teaching, so I couldn't go. But the things you had to do or the things Mike Oldfield had to do to create that piece of music. So what happens is there's like times when you think about that piece of music, there's a lot of repetition of the riff, all this business. It became very famous. It's got a lot of history to it because his manager at the time, his friend, was a certain Mr. Branson, and they couldn't get a record deal. So Mr. Branson decided to start up this record company called Virgin Records. And it was only last week that I went up to Sydney for a wonderful conference by Virgin Airlines. So the start of all that was Tubular Bells. You can blame Mike Oldfield for giving Mr. Branson the break to start up an airline company. Guess who adapted there? Poof!
No! No! No!
No, it was great. It's wonderful. So that's the bit about go with what you've got. You might get all these chops, but just for chop's sake and Chop City, look how fast I can go. You see it on Facebook and YouTube all the time. You go, what are they calling this 60-year-old rudiment this week? Just so, you know. I heard one thing, Steve Gadd's Flutter Lick, and I've gone, I was there when it first came out on Chick Corea's Leprechaun album.
That little guy goes, I'm the Leprechaun. Scott, I'm the Leprechaun. Cool it, okay? I'm the Leprechaun. Stop it, all right? Don't try and steal me, particle.
Did they call it that then? I can't remember that. And I had every album and every book and every teacher at Hyde's back in the day in Multan Street. Oh, did you hear that? No one ever called it a flutter lick. What was that? Okay. I got to play it now, don't I? What you got is you might have. I do it all the time. Right, left, left. Right, right, left. That was my version of it. Steve Gadd didn't quite have the Bonzo bass drum patch. You know, da-da-da, 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 da-da-da. Anyway, moving right along. So what happens is you've got your going with what you've got, you see. All of a sudden, a double stroke roll can be something completely else, something else. It could be used by Steve Gadd in a funk kind of idea when you're doing, say, sound effects and you're doing things like this, like I did before. Oh, pardon me. One of the first things that happened when I got the triggers and started doing sound tracky and things, well, that is that, especially with these, what am I going to do with them? If I think adapt to things like when I'm doing my musical theory business and stuff like that, and I'm a bit of a lover of the old, more out there jazz, so I love Miles Davis and I love John Coltrane. And John Coltrane used to, the way that he played his saxophone, he used to refer to it as sheets of sound. Yes, money penny. If Sean Connery played saxophone, yes. Sheets of sound. He just... I keep that for reference. One of the big things about press rolls and double stroke rolls, if I'm thinking about that, is Remembrance Days with the Essendon band, when it used to be just, we're playing hymns today, Chris, it's just, just press roll. My joke! As if it was easy. I'd be like that. Oh my Lord. You see? If you turn it into a double stroke roll, I really am thinking the sheets of sound, I got it right then, a la John Coltrane. So I'm morphing across to another instrument for influence for this instrument here, whether it be just the snare drum, a 4-piece, a 5-piece, or whatever it might be. And that's what happens. One of the most dramatic, terrible, awful things that has happened over the last 6 years is COVID. I'm moving on to the next bit to finish off. The effects of COVID, it's decimated so many industries, especially the musical industry. Okay, one of the things that basically happened to we musicians is that with all the job seeker business and all that sort of stuff, so many of us as freelancers, solo, sole traders, all that sort of stuff fell between the cracks for things like job seeker and stuff like that. So they were essentially, everyone was basically unemployed overnight and all that. This is not a political statement. What it is just that is what happens with pandemics. I grew up with the stories of my dear old granddad who served in World War I, and he came home to Spanish flu and told me all about, geez, I've been fighting in North Africa. He was a light horseman, and I don't want to go to water just yet, Chris, come on. And what it is he told me all the effects and what everyone had to do then. So when COVID happened, at least for me and my history, I said to myself, well, Dad went off to World War II. He ran pubs, he ran the Dan O'Connell, and during those days of, Dad had the Dan O'Connell Hotel from 1963 to 76 during all, essentially, the Vietnam years. So I'd be picking up ashtrays as a little kid, little tacker, ended up serving behind the bar. you know, when I was about 13. You could do that when you're part of the publican's family. I'd hear nothing but stories from the lads that went away to Vietnam. I'd also grew up with all the stories with Dad's mates from World War II. So when COVID hit, for me, it was just my time. It was my time. What do you do? I caught a break because what it is that I happened to fall into community television back in '95. And here I am today. And it's been a wonder. Roller coaster ride, of course, like anything. But one of the things, I don't want to make this too much of an editorial, but what happens is that you actually, here we are, this is what we've got, okay? This is what we have to go through. This isn't going to work anymore. I've got to do this now. I've got to think about another way of using this double stroke roll. I've got to think of another way to, you know, get paid. I've got to think of an angle. You got to have an angle. Danny Kaye. I think it was White Christmas. You see? Bing Crosby. I'm dreaming of getting another angle. Sorry, I just butchered that. But anyway, we are living in uncertain times, you know, that kind of thing. What are you going to do? The effects of COVID. You have to learn to adapt something. You've got to do something else, you know. A band used to go into a studio for quite a while to make an album. Now you can make it in a joint like this. Do you see? This is where, you know, I make my things. I used to have to go into RMIT and book the machines, but all of a sudden I bought this computer and I had iMovies on it. Wow! Now I use Final Cut Pro. It's wonderful. I love it. I do more editing than anything else now, especially with the second show, which came out of COVID, Impromptu TV, which is coming on straight after this show, in the sense that during those days of COVID, all my colleagues and friends, we all banded together and we did all these remote clips, and some of them just had their phones to sing into. And the quality of the technology, you know, sort of thing is a wonder. I used to roam around with this gigantic camera on my shoulder, filming gigs for all the different bands and stuff like that back in the 90s. And camera mic quality, you know, it'd be like a 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. And what it is now, it's pretty good. You know, it's not bad at all. So I'll love and leave you with all that. These are troubled times. So, what am I talking about? Publish or perish. Adapt or die. At some point, you've got to go with what you got. Never stop learning. Put every lesson into the brain bank. You'll never know when it needs to come up. Something as simple as a clean single stroke roll. Better wrap it up there. Let me quickly go. Publish or perish, adapt or die. Go with what you got, and a little bit about the effects of COVID, which we're still seeing today. Now for a nice glass of...
I ain't got nobody, and nobody cares for me. Igor, Frederick,